And culture is something which you don't have to make special efforts to bring it in, because that's something you have brought up as a part of that culture. So what you would design would be a reflection of your upbringing, because you have not been brought up as somebody else. You are brought up as part of this culture. So whole upbringing, right from your parents, grandparents, that whole heritage. So you learn small things, how to respect, how to behave, how to respond to certain things. And there are so many things which have been developed because of our climate. Because the one thing is about removing shoes before you enter a house, and that's because we tend to sit on the floor and eat, and that's the reason you need a floor to be kept clean. And why we sit on the floor? Because climate allows us to sit on the floor, which they can't do it in a Western country where the floor is absolutely cool. So that becomes part of your culture. But knowingly, unknowingly, you have these habits imbibed into you, and that becomes part of the architecture. So it just gets absorbed, and then you learn from it and you develop it.
Hello everyone, I am Deepika from VSpark VIT Vellore. Today we have inaugurated our very first grand event in this school of architecture called HAT Exhibition. This is a student exhibition that covers students' works on three major genres: heritage, art, architecture and technology. We had with us architect Sanjay Mohe as the guest of honor today, and on behalf of Tali Talks, we are here to interview him. Architect Sanjay Mohe is the founding partner of Mindspace Architects Bangalore, and they as a team, they have worked on several projects across the country which have bagged several awards, and their projects mainly focus on climate as a primary factor in their designs, and a very striking feature is that they bring in nature into all of their buildings. So first of all, sir, thank you so much for being here on our very grand event. This is the very first event after the COVID lockdown we are conducting in the VSpark building, and thank you once again for this fabulous building that you have given us, particularly for our students here in the architecture school. So you have already answered several questions that our students have asked you, and also they have expressed their feelings about the building. So just specific ones, a little broad. So the first one is how do we connect context and culture through our buildings?
Well, the context is something which we start with in every building. I mean, that is the starting point to understand site, understand how the sun moves, how the wind moves, how the water flows onto the site. If there are any specific parameters in terms of existing trees, rocks, slopes, so that is something which is all measurable part. There's something which we start the whole design based on these constraints or these parameters. I won't call them as constraints. Actually, we take advantage of that and build around it, taking those as references. And culture is something which you don't have to make special efforts to bring it in, because that's something you have brought up as a part of that culture. So what you would design would be a reflection of your upbringing, because you have not been brought up as somebody else. You are brought up as part of this culture. So whole upbringing, right from your parents, grandparents, that whole heritage. So you learn small things, how to respect, how to behave, how to respond to certain things. And there are so many things which have been developed because of our climate. Because the one thing is about removing shoes before you enter a house, and that's because we tend to sit on the floor and eat, and that's the reason you need a floor to be kept clean. And why we sit on the floor? Because climate allows us to sit on the floor, which they can't do it in a Western country where the floor is absolutely cool. So that becomes part of your culture. But knowingly, unknowingly, you have these habits imbibed into you, and that becomes part of the architecture. So it just gets absorbed, and then you learn from it and you develop it.
That's very true, sir. Our culture has brought the spaces and our lives together, and we are experiencing these things on an everyday basis, rather. So about the light, you've already spoken about light inside the space. So your designs mostly emphasize bringing light into the space. So what is the reason behind bringing so much of light into your designs?
It's not only the light, but we want to bring nature into the building. So light being part of nature, you want a breeze to come in. You want one thing we make sure right from the beginning is as long as you have a light outside, you should not be, as far as possible, not switching on lights inside. So this is what happens more or less in this building, because you tend to you make special efforts to bring in that light, but the light brings in heat also. So you have to make sure that you are not bringing too much of light. So that is the functional part of it. But there is this other element where how it changes from morning to evening, from January to December, and how you respond to that movement, and how the space changes because of that quality of light. See, normally architecture is a very static object. Once you build it, it is not going to change. But what really changes is that light quality, which from morning to evening you'll see the whole space changing, and it has an emotional impact on the users. So how people use it has a direct impact on if this light was not there, if it was a dark space, you probably would use it in a very different way. But the moment that sunlight comes in, you have a different kind of a feel to it, different energy brought into it. So we always like to play with the light, but as I said, that controlling that light, natural light, without heating up the space, is a skill which you keep learning all the time.
That's very well said. And when we speak about light in this particular building, we enjoy it a lot because there are different parts of the day where we experience different character of light in this building through the jali, through the skylights. And very interestingly, we have this particular open space over here where we could see the sunset, and we see students standing here all the time taking pictures of this one. So that's a very beautiful scene you have set for us. This is a particular frame which is very attractive in this particular building. That's something that I wanted to tell you as a user of this space. So, sir, talking about the experiences here, what is your view about landscape as such inside a building?
Yeah, as I said, we always want to respond to nature. So you would always want the nature to come in. Uh, Wherever there is an existing tree, we always work around that, try to preserve it, because then you get a ready-made landscape. But when it is not there, you create a place for it. Like here, we have created these places for trees to grow in every courtyard, even in the spine. And then as you said, we frame the trees all around, and try to see that there is a strong connection between inside and outside. And you would try to sort of blur that boundaries between inside and outside. So there's a point where you say, okay, is it outside space or inside space? So this is something which we have learned from Mr. Korea, Doshi, Mr. Bawa, and so they are the one who really taught us how to blur the boundaries between outside and inside, and that has been our efforts in every building to do that, whether it's a small house or a large institution or whatever. You try to create that connection between outside and inside.
The connections between the indoors and outdoors should always exist, and we always connect to Mother Earth all the time. So that's very well said, sir. So what are the challenges that you face while designing institution buildings as such?
Probably one of the biggest challenges is one of the clients had asked us, you create a space which would inspire us. Now, if you ask somebody, you will know immediately a teacher who has influenced you. And you can immediately name a teacher who has influenced you. But to say a space which has inspired you is you'll have to think about which is that space which has inspired me. So if once somebody tells you you create a space that inspires, you really have to look at the emotions, create that feeling of something which is larger than life, and and make a student feel that okay, I have to really live up to that standard, create something, you know, bring the benchmark higher. So that becomes a challenge, especially while designing an institution. You have all the regular parameters. You have to deal with functionality. You have to deal with materiality. You have to deal with climate. All those elements are all. But on top of that, you have to inspire students. And if you specifically ask me what is that challenge, is to do something which makes it different, and it tells you this is what I want to do in my life. That's a difficult part.
Inspiring somebody as an architect, because the name itself it speaks, and beyond that you have given a space like this particularly to the architecture students. They can use this as a lab for learning, and that is something that the students are blessed to get actually in this particular space. So beyond all the challenges, you have managed to give us such a wonderful space for which we'll always be indebted.
Big honor to hear that.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And one last question, sir. What are your suggestions for the young architects and students to prepare themselves to face the industry?
Probably the most important aspect is to be passionate about what you are doing. So, the moment you have that passion to learn, passion to create, um, everything falls into place. I feel you don't have to make any special effort. So, when you love something that you do, they always say it doesn't remain like a work. It just becomes a part of your it you enjoy that whole process. And if you really enjoy that process and you start taking pride in what you are doing, um, then I think rest of it falls into place, because the challenges of the industry which are there today won't be there tomorrow. There'll be new challenges, so you keep learning to deal with that. And this is something which is a constant process, where when you deal with a client, when there is a commercial pressure, there is a political pressure, there is a economical pressure. So slowly, when you are in the profession, you sort of learn to deal with all those pressures. But as long as you are passionate about what you are doing, no, that is something which is probably the most fundamental thing for survival. And that's where uh, that's where I think you create the best. And I think every student should be taught to be passionate. That's it.
Wonderfully said, sir. Actually, in even when we speak to students, oftentimes they get demoralized or they just go sit in a corner. But we try to cheer them up and bring that fire back in them to own their own designs in the design studios itself. So I think that's one thing what every faculty or every person who's teaching architecture should also take note of, to instigate that fire in every student.
That
So.
you put it perfectly.
Right. So once again, thank you so much for being with us, and congratulations to you on the LEED certification for this
We are
building.
very proud of it. That's
Of
something
course.
which is very nice to have.
So are we, sir. So are we. We share the feeling with you, and we would like to see you more often at
Love to
Spark.
come, and today we felt so honored to be here and
Definitely, it's actually our honor to.
participate in this whole process.
Right. It's our
It's
honor
very
to
nice.
have had you, sir. Right.
Privileged.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.